Princess Nalara had been the brightest star in the Viridian Empire for over 2 centuries. Her people loved watching her walk through the palace gardens, where her skin would shift from deep ocean blue to brilliant gold, depending on her mood. When she laughed, tiny sparkles of light would dance around her fingers. When she was thinking deeply about empire matters, her whole body would glow with a soft silver light that made everyone around her feel calm and safe. But now, as she lay in the medical center of the imperial palace, there was barely any light left in her at all. The quantum plague had been eating away at her life force for 3 months. What started as small dark patches on her arms had spread across her entire body like black veins crawling under her skin. The court doctors, the most skilled healers in the galaxy, had tried everything they knew. Nothing worked. Emperor Vorthak sat beside his daughter's bed every day, watching helplessly as she grew weaker. He was a powerful ruler who commanded respect from 1,000 worlds, but he couldn't save the one person who mattered most to him. His advisors whispered that maybe it was time to prepare for the worst, but Vorthak refused to give up. He sent messages to every corner of the galaxy, promising half his empire's wealth to anyone who could cure his daughter. Meanwhile, billions of light years away, Captain Kim Tae-ho was fixing a broken engine on his small cargo ship when the message reached him. His ship wasn't much to look at from the outside. Dents and scratches covered the hull from years of dangerous missions, but it was home to him and his small crew, who had become like family over the years. Park Soo-jin, his medic, was only 25 but had already seen more battlefield injuries than most doctors see in a lifetime. She had gentle hands and a quick mind that could figure out medical problems that stumped others. Lee Won-ho, the engineer, could fix anything that had gears, wires, or engines. He was quiet most of the time, but when he spoke, everyone listened, because he usually had something important to say. Choi Min-ah, their navigator, could plot a course through the most dangerous parts of space, and had never gotten them lost, not even once. When Tai-ho read the Emperor's message, his crew noticed the change in his face immediately. They had worked together for 5 years and could read each other's expressions like a book. Soo-jin saw the old pain flicker in his eyes, the same look he got whenever someone mentioned his younger brother Jin-woo. Jin-woo had been everything good in Tai-ho's life. Smart, funny, always helping their neighbors even when their own family had barely enough food. When Jin-woo got sick at age 16, Tai-ho had worked 3 jobs trying to pay for treatments. He sold everything he owned, begged doctors, and even tried stealing medicine. Nothing worked. Jin-woo died holding his big brother's hand, apologizing for being such a burden. That was 15 years ago, but the guilt still ate at Tai-ho every single day. "Captain," Min-ah said carefully, "that's Viridian space. They don't exactly welcome humans there." She was right. The Viridians had always looked down on humans as a young, primitive species. They had technology that seemed like magic, cities that floated in the clouds, and healing methods that could bring people back from the edge of death. To them, humans were barely evolved apes who had just learned to travel between stars. But Emperor Vorthak was desperate now. His message didn't care what species someone was. He just wanted his daughter to live. Won-ho looked up from his tools. It could be a trap. What if they're just gathering information about human capabilities? Tae-ho stared out the small window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a father was watching his child die, feeling the same helplessness that had destroyed Tae-ho's world 15 years ago. Maybe the Viridians were arrogant. Maybe they looked down on humans. But right now, none of that mattered. "Set course for Viridia Prime," he said quietly. His crew exchanged glances but didn't argue. They trusted their captain's judgment, even when it led them into dangerous situations. As their ship turned toward Viridian space, Tae-ho couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything. The journey would take 6 days through hyperspace. As they traveled toward the crystal towers of the imperial capital, Tae-ho tried not to think about Jin-woo's last words, but they echoed in his mind anyway. Maybe this time, he could save someone's little sister. Maybe this time, he wouldn't fail. When Tae-ho and his crew arrived at the Viridian Imperial Palace, they felt like insects walking into a cathedral made of pure light. The walls were constructed from living crystal that pulsed with soft energy, and the ceilings stretched so high they disappeared into misty clouds. Everything was beautiful and intimidating at the same time. The Viridian court physicians were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with skin that looked like polished gemstones, shifting between deep purple and brilliant silver. Their eyes were large and completely black, and when they moved, it was with a fluid grace that seemed to defy gravity. Dr. Yoon Hae-young, the Empire's chief healer, had been working on Princess Nalara's case for months. She was considered the greatest medical mind in the galaxy, someone who had cured diseases that other species couldn't even pronounce. When the human team entered the medical chamber, Dr. Yoon barely glanced in their direction. She was in the middle of a complex procedure, her hands glowing with energy as she tried to repair the princess's damaged cells. To her, these humans were just another desperate attempt by the Emperor to find a miracle cure. She had seen dozens of healers from across the galaxy fail where she had failed. What could these primitive beings possibly offer? "Stay out of the way," she said, in perfect but cold human language. "We are conducting delicate work here." Taeho felt his jaw clench, but he kept his mouth shut. Sujin stepped forward respectfully. "Doctor, we just want to help. Maybe fresh eyes could see something different." The other Viridian physicians actually laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. One of them, Dr. Kethron, shook his head. "Your species has barely mastered basic surgery. We are working with quantum cellular reconstruction. Please do not interfere." But Sujin wasn't easily discouraged. She had learned long ago that sometimes the simplest approach worked when complicated methods failed. While the Viridian doctors continued their elaborate procedures, she quietly asked for permission to examine some of the princess's blood samples. Dr. Yoon waved her hand dismissively, as if granting permission to a child who wanted to play with toys. Sujin spent the entire night in a small laboratory attached to the medical bay. She didn't have access to the Viridians' advanced quantum microscopes or their energy scanners. All she had were the basic tools from her ship and her own stubborn determination. Wonho brought her coffee every few hours and sat with her as she worked, knowing she needed the company even if she didn't ask for it. "Look at this," Sujin whispered around 3 in the morning, pointing to her simple microscope display. "The blood cells are dying in a pattern. It's too regular to be natural." She had noticed something the advanced Viridian equipment had missed, because it was designed to look for complex quantum diseases. The scanners were so sophisticated they couldn't detect something relatively simple. It was like using a telescope to look for something right in front of your face. Working carefully through the night, Sujin found tiny traces of artificial compounds mixed in with the princess's blood. They were microscopic robots, so small they were almost invisible, but they were definitely there. Each one was programmed to attack specific parts of the princess's cellular structure while creating symptoms that looked exactly like the quantum plague. When morning came, Sujin ran to find Taeho, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "Captain, this isn't a disease at all. Someone is poisoning Princess Nalara with nanobots. They're designed to mimic plague symptoms while doing something else entirely." Taeho felt his blood run cold. "What else are they doing?" "They're harvesting her genetic material. Someone is slowly stealing samples of her royal DNA while making it look like she's dying from natural causes." The investigation that followed was like putting together a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. Mina used her navigation skills to track who had access to the princess's food and medicine. Wonho analyzed the nanobots' programming to figure out where they might have been made. Taeho questioned palace guards and servants, looking for anyone who seemed nervous or guilty. The trail led them to Prince Zerion, Princess Nalara's uncle and the Emperor's younger brother. He had always been jealous of his brother's power and his niece's position as heir to the throne. For months he had been slowly poisoning her while pretending to be concerned about her health. His plan was simple: let her die from the fake plague, claim the throne as the next in line, then use her harvested genetic material to prove his own royal bloodline was stronger. When they confronted Prince Zerion in his private chambers, he didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled coldly and activated something on a small device he wore on his wrist. "You're too late, humans. The nanobots have just received their final command. My dear niece will be dead within 6 hours, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it." Sujin's face went pale as she understood what had happened. The nanobots have switched to kill mode. They're going to destroy her nervous system completely. The only way to stop them is for someone to link their consciousness directly to hers and extract each nanobot manually. "What does that mean?" Taeho asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "It means someone has to volunteer to experience every bit of damage the nanobots cause while pulling them out one by one. The person doing it will feel everything the princess feels, but 100 times worse. And the process will probably kill them." The room fell silent as the weight of those words sank in. Somewhere in the palace, Princess Nalara was dying, and the only way to save her required someone to sacrifice their own life. The biosynchronization chamber looked like something from a nightmare. It was a circular room with walls covered in pulsing tubes and wires that glowed with an eerie blue light. In the center sat 2 medical pods connected by a web of neural cables that would link 2 minds together. The Viridian technicians moved around the equipment with nervous energy, checking and rechecking their instruments. None of them had ever attempted this procedure before, and everyone knew the chances of success were almost zero. Dr. Yoon Hai-young stood at the control panel, her crystalline fingers hovering over the activation switches. For the first time since the humans had arrived, she looked uncertain. "The neural pathways between human and Viridian minds are completely different," she explained to the room. "When we link your consciousness to the princess, your brain will try to process alien thoughts and sensations it was never designed to handle. The pain will be beyond anything you can imagine." The other Viridian physicians had already made their position clear. Dr. Kethran shook his head firmly when asked to volunteer. "Our neural systems are too similar to the princess. The feedback would kill us instantly. Besides, we have responsibilities to the Empire that extend beyond this single life." It was a cold, logical response that made perfect sense from their perspective. But it also meant that Princess Nalara would die unless someone else stepped forward. The Emperor himself had begged his court physicians to try, offering them anything they wanted, but fear and self-preservation won out over duty. When Taeho said he would do it, the words came out so quietly that at first, people weren't sure they had heard him correctly. "I'll do it," he repeated, louder this time. The reaction was immediate. Wonho jumped up from where he had been sitting and grabbed his captain's arm with both hands. "Captain, no, you can't be serious. They just told us the survival rate is less than 10%. That means 9 out of 10 people who try this procedure die." Sujin stepped between them, her face pale but determined. "There has to be another way. Give me more time to study the nanobots. Maybe I can find a different solution." Minna was already pulling up star charts on her portable device. "We could take the princess to Earth. Human doctors might have different approaches. We don't have to try this crazy procedure." But Taeho shook his head. "There isn't time. You heard what Prince Zerion's nanobots are programmed to do. She has maybe 5 hours left, and it takes 3 days to reach Earth through hyperspace." The argument continued for several minutes, with his crew trying every possible reason to change his mind. They talked about the mission they had waiting back on Kepler Station, about how the galaxy needed good people like him, about how his death wouldn't bring his brother back. But Taeho had already made his decision the moment he understood what needed to be done. Princess Nalara, who had been drifting in and out of consciousness, opened her eyes and looked directly at him. Her voice was barely a whisper, but everyone in the room could hear her. "Please don't die for me. You don't even know me. I'm not worth your life." Those words hit Taeho like a physical blow. He walked over to her medical pod and knelt down beside it, looking into her large, dark eyes that were filled with pain and sadness. Up close, he could see the nanobots' damage more clearly. Dark veins spread across her luminescent skin like cracks in broken glass, and her breathing was shallow and labored. "You're wrong," he said gently. "I know enough about you. I know you're someone's daughter. I know your father loves you so much he sent messages across the entire galaxy begging for help. I know your people look up to you and need you to lead them someday. And I know that 15 years ago I watched my little brother die from something I couldn't cure, and I've been carrying that guilt ever since." Tears began running down Princess Nalara's face, leaving glowing trails on her cheeks. "But you could die. Your friends need you. Your family needs you." Taeho smiled sadly. "My crew will be fine. They're stronger than they think. And as for family, well, Jinwoo has been waiting a long time for me to do something that would make him proud. Maybe."
"This is it."
The medical technicians began preparing the synchronization equipment, while Taeho's crew made their final attempts to talk him out of it. Sujin checked his vital signs one last time and made sure the emergency medical kit was ready. Won-ho ran diagnostics on all the equipment, looking for any possible malfunction that might give them an excuse to delay. Mina calculated how long they had before the nanobots would cause irreversible damage, hoping for more time than they actually had. But time was running out. Princess Nalara's condition was getting worse by the hour, and everyone could see it. Her skin, which had been dimly glowing when they first arrived, was now almost completely dark. Her breathing was becoming more difficult, and the monitoring equipment showed her vital signs dropping steadily. As the first rays of dawn began filtering through the crystal walls of the medical chamber, Taeho lay down in the synchronization pod. The neural cables felt cold against his skin as the technicians attached them to various points on his head and spine. Mina squeezed his hand one last time before stepping back to let the doctors work. "If this goes wrong," Taeho said to his crew, "make sure you tell everyone back home that humans don't give up. We don't abandon people who need help, even if they're different from us." Dr. Yoon looked at him with something that might have been respect. "Are you ready, Captain?" Taeho closed his eyes and thought about Jinwoo's smile. "I'm ready." The procedure began as dawn broke over the crystal towers of Viridia Prime. The moment the neural link activated, Taeho's entire world turned into a nightmare of pain that no human had ever experienced before. It felt like someone had poured liquid fire directly into his brain and then struck him with lightning at the same time. The alien neural pathways were completely different from human ones, and his mind struggled desperately to process sensations it was never designed to handle. Within the first few minutes, Taeho understood why the Viridian physicians had refused to attempt this procedure. The pain wasn't just physical. It was like having his consciousness stretched and twisted in directions that shouldn't exist. Colors that had no names burned behind his eyes, and sounds that couldn't be heard with ears echoed through his skull. Every nerve in his body screamed in protest as it tried to adapt to an alien nervous system. But through the chaos and agony, Taeho could sense the nanobots. They appeared in his shared consciousness like tiny black spiders crawling through a web of light. Each one was programmed with a specific task. Some were destroying Princess Nalara's cellular structure, others were harvesting her genetic material, and the deadliest ones were targeting her brainstem to ensure she would die within hours. The extraction process was like trying to perform brain surgery while being electrocuted. Taeho had to focus his consciousness on each individual nanobot, surround it with his mental energy, and then force it to shut down and exit the princess's system. Every time he destroyed one, the feedback sent waves of crushing pain through both their minds. But every time he succeeded, Princess Nalara's condition improved slightly. Sujin monitored both patients from the control room, watching their vital signs with growing alarm. Taeho's heart rate was dangerously high, his blood pressure was fluctuating wildly, and his brain activity showed patterns she had never seen before. "His neural pathways are overloading," she told Dr. Yoon. "The human brain isn't designed to handle this kind of stress." Meanwhile, Princess Nalara's readings were slowly stabilizing. The dark veins that had been spreading across her skin began to fade, and her luminescent glow started returning bit by bit. But she could feel everything Taeho was experiencing, and the shared pain was almost unbearable. Through their mental connection, something unexpected began to happen. Princess Nalara started experiencing Taeho's memories as if they were her own. She saw him as a young boy of 12, sitting beside his brother Jinwoo's hospital bed. Jinwoo was only 8 years old, but he looked even smaller against the white sheets, his face pale and thin from months of illness. She felt Taeho's desperate love for his little brother, the way he would sneak extra food from his own meals to try to help Jinwoo gain weight. She experienced the crushing guilt he carried when he couldn't afford the expensive treatments the doctors recommended. Most painfully, she felt the moment when Jinwoo took his last breath, squeezing his big brother's hand and whispering, "I'm sorry for being sick, Young, don't be sad." But she also experienced the promise Taeho made that day, that he would somehow find a way to help other people who were sick and dying. She felt the years of pain that drove him to become a mercenary, taking dangerous jobs so he could send money to medical research facilities. She understood that every risky mission he accepted was his way of trying to make Jinwoo's death mean something. As the hours passed, more nanobots fell to Taeho's relentless mental assault. His consciousness was like a warrior armed with nothing but determination, hunting down enemies in a landscape of pure agony. Sometimes he would pause for a moment and Princess Nalara could sense his thoughts through their link. "I won't let you die like he did," Taeho's mental voice whispered to her during one of these pauses. "I couldn't save Jinwoo, but I can save you." Princess Nalara tried to respond, to tell him he had already done enough, but the pain made it difficult to form coherent thoughts. Instead, she experienced more of his memories, the loneliness he felt after Jinwoo's death, the way he threw himself into dangerous work to avoid dealing with his grief, and the deep sadness he carried everywhere he went. By hour 10, Taeho's hour, vital signs were becoming critical. His body temperature had spiked dangerously high and his heart was struggling to maintain a steady rhythm. Wonho paced frantically around the medical bay while Minna held Sujin's hand so tightly, her knuckles were white. "We need to stop the procedure," Dr. Yoon said urgently. "He's going into cardiac arrest." "No," Sujin said firmly, tears streaming down her face. "He wouldn't want us to stop. Look at Princess Nalara. She's almost completely healed. He's winning." Indeed, the princess's skin was now glowing brightly, and the dark veins had almost completely disappeared. But the cost was becoming clear. Taeho's consciousness was fragmenting under the strain, and his physical body was shutting down system by system. In the shared mental space, Princess Nalara finally managed to speak to him directly. "Why are you doing this? Why sacrifice everything? For someone you don't know?" Taeho's response came not in words but in a flood of emotion and memory. She felt his belief that every life had value, his conviction that good people should protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and his simple, stubborn refusal to let anyone die if he could prevent it. "Because someone has to," he finally whispered through their connection. "Because if we don't take care of each other, who will?" In hour 14, Taeho found the final cluster of nanobots hiding deep in Princess Nalara's brainstem. These were the most dangerous ones, programmed to cause instant death if they detected any tampering. Destroying them would require him to channel every remaining bit of his consciousness into one final attack, knowing it would probably kill him. Without hesitation, he gathered what was left of his mental energy and struck. The nanobots disintegrated under the assault, but the feedback was devastating. Taeho's consciousness shattered like glass, and his physical body convulsed once before going completely still. Princess Nalara's crystalline form suddenly blazed with brilliant light as her full health returned. Her eyes opened wide and clear, for the first time in months, and she sat up in her medical pod feeling stronger than she had in years. But in the other pod, Taeho lay motionless, his face peaceful, but his chest no longer rising and falling. The medical bay filled with the steady, heartbreaking tone of the life support systems confirming what everyone could see. Captain Kim Taeho, the human who had traveled across the galaxy to save a stranger, was dead. But Princess Nalara was alive, and she would carry his memories and his courage with her for the rest of her very long life. When Taeho's eyes finally opened 4 days later, the first thing he saw was Princess Nalara sitting beside his medical bed, her skin glowing with perfect health. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, or maybe even dead. The last thing he remembered was the crushing pain of destroying the final nanobots. Then everything had gone black. "You're awake," Princess Nalara said softly. and her voice was stronger than he had ever heard it. "We weren't sure you would make it." Your heart stopped for almost 6 minutes. Taeho tried to sit up but immediately felt dizzy. His entire body ached like he had been hit by a cargo ship, and there was a strange buzzing sensation in his head that he had never experienced before. Sujin appeared at his side instantly, checking his pulse and looking into his eyes with a small medical light. "Take it easy, Captain," she said, relief clear in her voice. "Your brain went through something no human has ever survived before. Dr. Yoon says you might have some lingering effects from the neural linking, but the important thing is that you're alive." Over the next few hours, as Taeho slowly recovered his strength, his crew filled him in on everything that had happened while he was unconscious. Prince Zerion had been arrested immediately after the nanobots were destroyed, and under interrogation, he had confessed to his entire plan. He was now locked in the deepest prison cell in the Empire, facing charges of attempted murder and treason. Emperor Vorthak had barely left the medical bay during Taeho's recovery. The powerful ruler who commanded respect from 1,000 worlds had spent 4 days pacing the hallways like a worried father, waiting to thank the human who had saved his daughter's life. When he finally got the chance to speak with Taeho, the Emperor's gratitude was overwhelming. "Captain Kim Taeho," the Emperor said formally, "you have given me back the most precious thing in my universe. Name your reward, and it shall be yours. I offer you wealth beyond measure, enough gold and crystals to buy entire planets. I offer you noble titles that would make you ruler of star systems. I offer you technology that could advance your species by centuries. Whatever you desire, it is yours." Taeho looked around the room at the incredible luxury surrounding him. The medical bay alone probably cost more than most human colonies earned in a year. The crystal walls pulsed with energy that could power Earth's biggest cities, and the medical equipment was so advanced it seemed like magic. He could ask for any of it and become the richest human who had ever lived. But instead, he made a request that surprised everyone in the room. "I want only one thing," Taeho said quietly. "Promise me that your empire will never again dismiss other species as primitive. Share your knowledge with those you consider lesser. Open your borders to cooperation and friendship, not just with humans, but with any species willing to learn and help others." The Emperor stared at him in disbelief. Dr. Yoon, who had been observing from the corner of the room, stepped forward with a puzzled expression. "Captain, do you understand what you're refusing? The Emperor is offering you riches that could transform your entire world." Taeho smiled weakly. "Doctor, I've spent my whole adult life traveling the galaxy, and I've learned something important. The most valuable things can't be bought or owned. Knowledge that saves lives, friendship between different peoples, the willingness to help strangers in need. These things are worth more than all the gold in the universe." Princess Nalara, who had been quietly listening, felt tears begin to flow down her luminescent cheeks. Through their neural connection, she had experienced not just Taeho's memories but his fundamental beliefs about right and wrong. She understood now that humans possessed something her advanced civilization had lost: the simple conviction that every life mattered, regardless of species or status. Over the following weeks, as Taeho recovered fully and prepared to leave with his crew, Princess Nalara began implementing changes that would transform the Viridian Empire forever. She established medical exchange programs that brought human doctors to study Viridian healing techniques, while sending Viridian physicians to learn human approaches to medicine. She opened the Empire's universities to students from dozens of species that had previously been considered too primitive for higher education. Most importantly, she used her influence to change how Viridians thought about other species. In speeches throughout the Empire, she told the story of the human captain who had risked everything to save someone he didn't know. She explained how human determination and compassion had succeeded where Viridian technology had failed. The night before Taeho was scheduled to leave Viridia Prime, Princess Nalara visited him one final time. They walked together through the palace gardens where she had once played as a child, her skin shifting through peaceful blue and gold colors as they talked. "I need to ask you something that's been bothering me," she said as they sat beside a fountain made of living crystal. "Why did you risk everything for a complete stranger? You could have died and your crew would have been left without their captain. Your species would have lost someone they clearly need. What made you think my life was worth that sacrifice? Taeho was quiet for a long moment, watching the crystal fountain create patterns of light in the water. Finally, he looked at her with the same gentle expression he had worn when he first volunteered for the procedure. You're asking the wrong question, he said. It's not about whether your life was worth the risk. It's about whether I could live with myself if I walked away when someone needed help. You see, Princess, that's what humans do. We choose to care even when it costs us everything. We choose to help even when it's dangerous. We choose to hope even when the odds are against us. It's not always logical and it's not always smart, but it's who we are. Princess Nalara nodded slowly, understanding flooding through her. That's why you're not really primitive at all, are you? You've discovered something we lost somewhere along the way. Maybe, Taeho said with a smile. Or maybe we just haven't learned to be afraid of caring yet. When Taeho and his crew finally departed Viridia Prime, they left behind an empire that was forever changed. The story of the human warrior who chose compassion over survival spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species began to look at humans with new respect, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their courage and their refusal to abandon those in need. Years later, when historians wrote about humanity's acceptance into galactic civilization, they would mark this moment as the turning point. Not a victory won through conquest or intimidation, but a transformation earned through love, sacrifice, and the simple human belief that every life has value. And somewhere in the stars, Captain Kim Taeho continued his journey, carrying with him the knowledge that his brother Jin Woo would have been proud of the choice he made in a crystal palace far from home.